Hi, everybody. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. So honored and delighted on this episode to be talking with comics creator, author Chuck Dixon. May I call you Chuck? Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely,
All
absolutely.
right, all right. Thank you so much for jumping in and joining and talking with me for a little bit.
No, no. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure, absolutely. I'll mention a couple of titles here at the beginning. Of course, you've worked in the worlds of Marvel and DC quite extensively, and you also have work in the world of prose novels as well. So books like
Yes,
Cannibal Gold and the Levon series. Am I saying that right, Levon?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And Conan novels, I believe, as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I've written three Conan novels. Two of them are currently in publication.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you are a person that creates across forms, which is always something that I'm interested in hearing about as far as the experience of that particular kind of work. Yeah. So curious about, as by means of a first question, uh, returning to the comics a little bit, what comics have allowed you to do and explore creatively?
Well, basically, dramatic form. Comics are an immediate experience.
Hmm.
They need to delight and engage on every page, which leads you to the grander themes. Comics as grand opera.
Hmm.
It's a terrific place to play, and I just love the medium because
Yeah,
in this medium, anything is possible.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that could be anything from a conversation over coffee to a space station or whatever it happens to be, and any kind of story as well.
Yeah, artists hate it when you say that, though. Comics have no budget; you can just do whatever. Yeah, yeah. Well, I gotta draw it.
True, true. A space station would take a good bit of time, I'm
Yes.
sure. Absolutely. So curious about the kinds of stories that you're drawn to tell and explore. What are the stories that you feel most at home in?
Generally action-oriented stories, although I like humor as well.
Hmm.
I'll dabble in a little bit of horror here and there, but generally, crime action is my primary thing. I've written a lot of superheroes,
Hmm.
but in a lot of cases they were in a crime action vein. Like currently, I worked on Alpha Core for Rippaverse, and it's very much a melding of a superhero story with a police thriller.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And I'll also say I had Graham Nolan on a couple of episodes ago, and I think both of you have kind of traveled in the direction of taking up your own work and sharing it more independently, which seems to be the way to go for a lot of storytelling.
Yeah, it seems to be the most vibrant. Well, it is. It doesn't seem to be. It is the most vibrant sector of the American comic medium right now. Is the truly independent creator. The
Hmm.
one who's a total free agent, not associated with one of the larger companies.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure that comes with its own, working for one of the larger companies, I'm sure comes with its own set of baggage and expectations and restrictions and things of
Yeah,
that nature.
basically, if you work for one of the big companies, you need permission to create.
Hmm.
Whereas if you're working independent, you don't. You just get up in the morning and go, "What do I want to do?" and you do it.
Yeah. And you own your creations to a
Yes.
greater degree as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah. Well, curious about some of those more recent milestones in your creating. I mentioned a couple of titles, but I'm always aware that folks also have sort of their favorites, their hit list that they enjoy. So curious about some of those milestones for you throughout the career.
Well, you know, uh, my first milestone was becoming a regular writer on Savage Sword of Conan.
Mhm.
That sort of, it made me a full-time comic book writer because I had 50 pages a month plus royalties. So I was allowed to quit my day job and just go work in the comics. And then, of course, campaigning to get on the Punisher and getting to write the Punisher.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then the biggest surprise of my career was I ended up writing Batman for 11 years, something I never pitched, I never interviewed for, I never tried out for,
Yeah,
but I was kind of reached out for by the Batman offices and wrote a whole lot of Batman in the 90s.
absolutely. yeah. Some of the big turns and events that happened in the 90s, you were the uh, part of the mastermind of all of that process.
Yeah, I'll say Denny O'Neil was the mastermind. We were
Mm,
all dancing to his tune, but it was an awesome time, and I have to say I'm proud of the fact that I appreciated every moment of it. I didn't take any of it for granted.
yeah, yeah. And nice that your career sort of has that return note to Conan, now working in prose novels
Yeah.
as well. And you worked in prose novels throughout, though. Am I wrong in that you wrote prose novels and adaptations in the 90s as well, if I'm remembering correctly?
No, no, I didn't really get into prose until the 2000s, like the 2010s,
Oh, okay.
because there wasn't enough. I wasn't getting enough comic work.
Mm,
I never set out to be a novelist or a prose writer. I just wanted to be a comic book guy. But there
yeah.
wasn't enough comic book work, and somebody offered me an opportunity to write a series of novels. I liked it, so I kept on doing it on my own.
Nice, nice. What is that creative process like for you between comics and working in the world of prose?
It's very different because I've never considered myself much of a wordsmith. I'm more an invisible hand comic book writer where I let the artist tell the story, and
Hmm.
I'm just there to, enhance the visuals with dialogue and captions, just enough, never too much, never nothing to draw attention to myself. And of course, when you're writing prose, you're writing directly to the reader. You're putting the pictures in the reader's mind, not into an artist's mind. So you
Hmm.
can't be quite as direct. You have to be a little bit more artful. And what surprised me most is how quickly readers establish those pictures in their mind.
Yeah.
And the other big thing that surprised me about novels is when they're over, they're over. In a comic form, I know how many pages I have.
Yeah.
In novels, sometimes I'm surprised. I'll write the final paragraph and go, well, I guess that's the end of the story. There's no reason to go any further. It's like when you finish a crossword puzzle and you don't realize it until you look up, look at the whole puzzle. Oh, it's completed.
Nice, nice. Yeah. Yeah. And you get to work a little bit without restrictions in that way at the same time, I imagine. Not
Yeah,
having the
entirely.
the 22. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not waiting on an artist, and generally you're completely on your own. I mean, there's no collaboration involved, so it's all
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
for
I
good
think
or ill.
curious about the collaborations that you've enjoyed most throughout the career so far.
Well, I worked a lot with Gary Quapis. He was my Conan artist, but we continued to work long after we both left Conan. He's my most frequent collaborator, although he's retired recently.
Mm,
Second would be Graham Nolan. Both of these guys became good friends, and we just did some great stuff together. Stuff I couldn't have done on my own. I hope they couldn't have done on their own.
mm, mm,
I
mm.
hope they needed me, and that back and forth. And currently, I don't mean I'm not doing this as like a pitch thing, but currently on the stuff for Riververse, I'm working with Joe Bennett, an artist from Brazil, and we
Mhm.
have that same feeling, that same idea of being on the same page and really exciting one another with ideas and concepts. Because a lot of times you work with an artist and they're the artist and they come in and they do their job, but then every once in a while there's this connection,
Yeah,
and it's much more of a collaborative effort.
yeah, yeah. And I'll say plug away. Absolutely. Glad to hear
Yeah,
about
well,
Rip Reversing.
I don't want to be shameless here, but it's what I'm working on currently, so it's in the front of my mind.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I always like to ask about that too, because I find that creative folks never stop, even if the creation takes a slightly different turn. So currently working in Rip Reverse, any other creative visions and pieces that you're currently exploring?
Well, I just last week finished the first draft of my 12th Levon Cade book, so that's off the prayers. And then I've got some. I'm working on two series for Arc Tunes,
Mm,
Black Warrant and Midnight's War, Night Streets. So I've got to do some writing on that this week and next. So those are what I'm, actually currently working on.
yeah, yeah. And I appreciate somebody who's able to write in sort of the elevated world of the superhero comics where there's a lot of willing suspension of disbelief. And on the other hand, write something like Levon Cade, which is more grounded, still crime centered,
Yeah.
but definitely follows those those really tight beats of plot. That's the expression I'm looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, and more reality based. I mean, it's a vigilante justice series, but it's unlike the Punisher. I try to base it as much in reality as possible. Levon Cade is not a superhero. He's not a Superman. He makes mistakes and he gets hurt.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Graham Nolan, I know currently has his creator-owned universe that he's working on. Do you still collaborate and keep in touch with Graham?
Oh, absolutely. We're always back and forth on emails and Facebook private message, and we're definitely going to do another installment of Joe Frankenstein. We've been
Mm,
talking over the plot line recently, so we're
nice.
definitely going to work together again.
Yeah, yeah. Now, he was also mentioning there's a different project that the two of you are working on at the moment too. There was like a separate website for it as well, I think. Am
Yeah, we're
I?
both a part of Spin Rack.
Yes, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, which we're calling Comics 3.0. It's digital comics, but it's also gaming, digital collectibles, things like that.
Yeah.
Uh, Merchandise, metaverse, all of this 21st century stuff that it's the next plateau in comics. Crowdfunding really was the big game changer, but
Hmm.
what comes next? And Spin Rack is what comes next.
Nice, nice.
And, and
Uh,
and it's important to say that it's not something we license. We didn't license our IP to Spin Rack. We are Spin Rack. We are founders. We're part of the company.
nice, nice. And digital comics and platforms for that is coming at a really nice time because I know in the past week, Amazon has sort of done some funky things with the Comixology app. So could be fortuitous timing as well.
Yeah, it's almost like Amazon bought it to bury it. Uh,
Yeah.
because I know, I mean, um, I never had much faith in digital comics. When I worked at CrossGen, we were doing digital comics, and we referred to them as comics on the moon because we really didn't think they'd take off.
Hmm.
The front office did, we didn't, and yet when DC went into it heavy, I saw the results of my royalty checks. I'm like, whoa, this is great, and it was growing, and then Comixology came along and those checks got smaller and smaller and smaller, which to me
Interesting.
means less people are seeing it. Pretty
Yeah.
obvious.
Yeah. For sure. Definitely. Yeah. So there's definite room for some growth in that way, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So curious on the storytelling side, where you're thinking next in terms of your creative vision, and is there a particular kind of story that you want to continue telling or that you'd like to take up?
No, just keep on with what I'm keeping on. I've got my own independent collaborations, I've worked on. One's completed. We just need to find a home for it. I'm not very good at the crowdfunding end of it. I respect Graham because he and his wife put in so much work
Yeah,
uh, to the Nolanverse, to Compass Comics, and I'm just not built that way. I can't concentrate on one project at a time. I'm always working on six different things all at once. But I will, be bringing out some independent crowdfunded projects of my own.
nice, nice. So it sounds like lots to follow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm always, coming up with some. It's like I got file drawers in my head I've got empty.
Nice. Yeah. That creative urge, that creative desire. Love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. So web spaces that you're most active on, or particular websites where folks can follow what you're doing.
Well, I'm on Facebook. I'm on X, under my own name. And they can go to Spin Rack. Spin Rack is also on Discord,
Hmm.
uh, where there's a pretty active community growing around creating comics, and Graham and I are there. We've got some tryout scripts featuring characters that we own. The people can see what a comic script looks like and maybe take a shot at penciling or inking or coloring or whatever process.
Nice.
And we're there to critique. I've seen some really really incredible work done there by people on spec, just trying out, just fooling around with storytelling. So it's
That's
pretty
cool.
cool.
Yeah, definitely. And also love how you're inviting creative voices in that way. That's such a kind thing to do as well.
Well, they got to come from somewhere, and I certainly got a leg up from a lot of the pros that I met over the
Mhm.
years. Going to the companies and meeting them at conventions. I always found that the comic books people are very generous about sharing
Yeah,
their knowledge.
yeah. Anybody particularly kind that you would point to as a sort of a mentor or guidepost along the way?
Well, a small army of comic creators in the 70s, 80s, and 90s will say Archie Goodwin because he helped
Hmm.
so many people.
Hmm.
He was such a terrific guy, such a terrific talent. I idolized him. He's the first writer I noticed in comics. And I still, to this day, think he's the greatest American comic book writer ever.
Hmm.
And he was incredibly generous with his time. And his advice, I would take up the most. I was not ready for years and years and years. I was simply not ready to write comics. As much as I wanted to write them, I wasn't ready. And I would take up the most horrible pitches. And he would always have suggestions to improve them that
Nice.
really improve them. Just reading over them quickly. So he's just an amazing guy.
Yeah, yeah. On the flip side of that, anybody who you kind of got to see start either at the same time as you or after that you're particularly proud of, you've kind of followed along with.
Well, I mean, I mentioned Graham,
Mm-hmm.
Mike Barron, who was like maybe 2 years ahead of me.
Yeah, yeah.
Barron set the bar in the 80s. And we all talk about Alan Moore and Frank Miller. Barron set the bar inside the comic book world of creators. He was the guy we were all looking at.
Hmm.
Nexus was the ultimate comic. We wanted to be that level of professionalism, that level of engagement and entertainment. So
Yeah.
I've always been chasing after him. I've always been in his shadow.
He wrote the first ever comic that I read. It was a
Wow.
Batman annual that he did, and it was
Wow.
not your typical Batman story. It was
Oh,
kind of a
no.
mystery thing. So,
Yeah, Mike doesn't write typical anything.
right, right, yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Um, so I have one more official question, and
Sure.
then we can hit anything that we might have missed that you want to mention. Um, and that is just craft wise, thinking about working in prose. I know that some folks sort of have the entire plan together as they go through, and they sort of almost write the last chapter first, and other people sort of go through the process, let the characters speak, let the story come together. And then some folks are probably in between. So curious about the approach that you take.
I take an approach similar to what Raymond Chandler said, his approach, the
Hmm.
story, which is I come up with a big scene or big scenes and then figure out how do I work these dramatically into a story that makes sense. Raymond Chandler, if you've read his writing, didn't worry so much if it made sense.
Right, right,
He just wanted the big scenes, which God love him, a fantastic writer, but not strong on plotting.
right.
Uh, but yeah, and then once I have that big scene, once I got that wow scene, I jump on it. I mean, for example, I watched the movie Marlowe recently, which was a Raymond Chandler pastiche, and
Hmm.
there's no big scene. They got it wrong.
Oh,
There's no scene you walk away from and go, oh, that was so cool.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I start there and then start thinking about character, and then as long as I've got my strong opening, which generally introduces the characters to the reader for the first time, then it's off to the races, and I'm heading toward that big scene, and trying to make it all work organically and seem natural, hiding the fact that you're reading a story. I'm a big fan of, like I said, invisible writing
Hmm.
and hiding plot. So it's not so the reader's not going, oh, I know what happens next, or I've been here before. It's like, no,
Right.
I want you to feel like you're experiencing it for the first time, and that's what I really sweat out.
Nice, nice. Well, it comes together well, and I appreciate the work you do, as I mentioned at the beginning, across media, and continue to enjoy the stories. Did I miss anything that you want to make sure to share before we close out?
Not really. No, we covered it pretty good, I
Sure.
think. Some
Okay.
great questions.
Well, thank you, thank you. I try brief form, but we seem to hit a lot in about 20 minutes in most cases. So I'll just say once more, I appreciate your work so much in comics, in prose, and definitely one of those creative voices that's lived in my mind for some time. So much appreciation.
Well, I don't know whether to apologize or thank you.
It's definitely a compliment.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think I turned out okay. So
Okay. Yeah, you seem well adjusted.
I try. Um, well, Chuck, thank you so much, and glad to talk to you anytime.
Certainly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.